Hello, friends and fellow bibliophiles. Welcome back to Kat's Novel Adventures. In today's video, I want to share my reading adventures with you that I had during Winterween. Good morning, everyone. Today is the first day of Winterween. I'm so excited. For those of you that don't know, Winterween is a week-long readathon hosted by Gabby over at Gabby Reads. I participated in Summerween for the first time in July and had a blast, and this will be my first Winterween, and I am looking forward to it. It's a great way to start the new year, and I think I have some pretty decent reads for this week. As you can see, I am all dressed, ready to go because I will be heading over to the South Shore. My husband has taken me because he's going to go over to my parents' house and help my dad with some things around his house. And while they're working on their little task for today, I will be visiting my mom at the rehab hospital. So if you don't know, my mom fell and broke her hip on December the 23rd and was in the hospital for a little bit, and she was moved to the rehab facility on Wednesday afternoon. Since Barry is driving, I'm going to get to do some reading. So let me go over the prompts and what I'm going to be reading for each of those prompts. This readathon, like I said, is week long. It's going to be from January the 5th to January 11th, which it ends on my birthday. How exciting is that? But the first prompt is to read a book in the dark or at night. And I have chosen to read The Shuddering by Anaya Alborn. This will be my first book by Anaya Alborn. And look at the cover. That just speaks to me about, snowy, wintry vibes. And I think it might be scary enough that reading it in the dark or at night will even make it creepier. Maybe so. It says, "They only come when it snows and nobody ever gets away." This is supposed to take place in a secluded cabin in the wintry mountains of Colorado. And that's all I'm going to say about it. This will also count for prompt number 3, which is to read a book with a snowy or winter setting. And then the second prompt is to read a book with a witch on the cover or in the title, or a book about witches. So I am excited to finally be getting to Slewfoot. This is a tale of bewitchery, and this is by Brom. I know it's about witches. I know there's some devil elements to it, but this cover is beautiful. The illustrations inside are wonderful. I'm going into it not really knowing too much about it. This will also count for prompt number 5, read a book with a W in the title. Doesn't matter where in the title of the book. And of course, there is a W right here in Slew. So very, very excited about that one. And then the last book that I've chosen is prompt number 4, read a book with purple on the cover. And I'm going with House of Shivers. This is the first book in this Goosebump series. It's called Scariest Book Ever by R.L. Stine. So lots of purples in this one. So I don't know. I think it's going to be a good time. I have not actually started reading anything significantly. I started my daily Stoic meditations book that I'm going to be reading all year long. I actually started that yesterday when it finally came in. This is going to be my first group of books that I'm going to be kicking the year off with, and I'm very excited to get started. So I will check back with you later today. I have to run to the UPS store and return a book because guess what? I ordered a hardcover copy of The Bridge of Terabithia and they sent me a paperback. How dare them? But anyway, sending that back through UPS, then we'll get on the interstate so that we can head to the South Shore, visit with my mom, and then we'll head back over to home. I'm hoping to get home in enough time that I perhaps can film my Mardi Gras TBR, which needs to go out extremely soon because that's going to be starting next week. And I'm also wanting to catch my friend Alex's sprints. She's over at Frank Fiction, wonderful channel, but she hosts sprints on Friday afternoons, and I want to be able to catch her sprints to get some more reading done for Winterween. So I'll catch you friends later. Enjoy your day. Bye. I have made it to the rehab facility. I just dropped my husband off. I wanted to update you really quickly on what I read while we were driving in. I didn't get as much reading done as I thought I would, but I am starting Winterween off with the House of Shivers book, scariest book ever by R.L. Stine, and only got through the first 3 chapters. It's pretty much setting up what the story is going to be about. Billy and Betty, they're twins. Their parents have just dropped them off to their Uncle Wendell's house. Weird Uncle Wendell. He lives in the woods in the Wayward Forest in this really odd looking house. They get there, no sign of Uncle Wendell. The parents just leave Betty and Billy there on Uncle Wendell's front steps, basically. Adios, call us when Uncle Wendell shows up. So, of course, they're knocking, nothing's happening. They finally get into the house because Billy tries the door and is able to get in, but it's very dark. They don't see much there. And then a man comes in. Well, it's Uncle Wendell. And he is like telling them they have arrived at a really bad time because one of his valuable books have been stolen. But he's going to get them to help him with this dilemma that he's in. We also find out that Wendell has a daughter named Jessie, and the twins didn't know anything about that because they have not seen Uncle Wendell and don't even remember him. The last time he had seen them, they were babies. And unfortunately, the dog Bellamy can't stay inside because all of Wendell's valuable items. So we'll see what happens next. Hopefully, the book that is lost is the scariest book ever. Otherwise, this is just going to be a cheesy good time. Straight, everyone seems to have a motive.
Alicia says, I guess I wouldn't have a shark as a pet, but I stand by my choice. LOL, I love that. And Gat says, mammals, all the mammals. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. It is mid-morning on Sunday. I did not get a whole lot of reading done yesterday. I actually didn't get to read until later in the afternoon and in the evening time because I went to the South Shore. My dad and I had a group meeting for dementia caregivers. They meet the first Saturday and the third Saturday of the month, and we try to go at least once a month. And then we had lunch at Bud's Broiler, and then we went to go visit my mom for a couple of hours at the rehab facility. So by the time I got home, I had a couple of things I had to do, eat, and then I was able to read a little bit of The House of Shivers. And then I read a little bit this morning to catch myself up. So I made it to page 80. I finished the first part of this book, and Wendell is definitely weird, and he's a bit elusive. So we discovered that a book was stolen. Well, the book that was stolen was the scariest book ever. And it's supposed to be very dangerous. So if it gets into the wrong hands, then all kinds of chaos and terrible things will be unleashed upon the world. Wendell is convinced that the thief has taken the book and run into the Wayward Forest, which the Wayward Forest is supposedly dangerous because it has all kinds of creepy creatures. He wants the twins to go with him into the woods, even though it is dangerous, and help him get this book back. A big, huge revelation comes at the end of part 1. I really am hoping that I can finish this book today because I need to get started on Slewfoot. I want to do that because, you only have a week to finish all of the books that you choose for Winterween. So far, it's okay. I mean, it's entertaining enough. I have to remember I need to put myself into the mind of a child that would read these Goosebumps books. So last night, I finally got to start The Shuddering by Anaya Alborn. I was sitting in my cozy chair next to a crackling fire. I was getting into the story, first couple of pages of the story, and then the phone rang. It was my sister. She was calling to check up on my mom, so we talked for a little bit, caught her up on everything, and then I decided, let me just go take my shower, and I got into bed. I made it to chapter 3. This is the perfect story to read during the winter season. You've got snow. You've got the isolated area in Colorado surrounded by woods. And you just have the cold feeling. And I guess because it's cold here in Louisiana, I'm feeling those feelings as well. So it's giving me all the wintry vibes that I want at this time of year. We are introduced to a couple that lives in the woods, Don and Jenny. And we're also introduced to a group of friends. Right from the very beginning, you have a character in peril, and it really sucked me in. We have Ryan and Jane Adler. They are twins. Imagine that. Another set of twins that I'm reading about. I mean, what are the odds that I'd have 2 books in the same week about twins? But they are older. They're like in their 30s, and they've decided to spend the weekend with some friends at their parents' home. It's like a getaway home, but it's not like a rinky-dink little cabin. It's a really nice place. Jane brings her friend Lauren, and Ryan invites a friend of both he and Jane's, Sawyer. But Sawyer is also bringing a girlfriend along. Her name is April. So the 5 of them are just going to be hanging out for the weekend. Unbeknownst to them, there is something terrible lurking in the woods. I don't know, just the idea of something watching you and you having no idea about that, especially in a place that's isolated and people don't know where you're at the moment, and you don't really have like Wi-Fi or a good phone connection. All that really does add up to a very scary story. Anyway, I'm very, very excited about reading this. I'm hoping to get to at least chapter 7 tonight. It's about 100 pages. And then I'm also hoping again to be able to finish this so that I can get started on Slewfoot at least by tomorrow. That's where I'm at. So until my next update, bye. Monday, January the 8th. It's about 5:30 in the evening. I did not finish the House of Shivers book yesterday because I spent pretty much the entire day reorganizing my bookshelves. And if you can see back there, I have the white bookcase officially in my office. And then I rearranged one of the bookshelves that was already in my living room. And then I added another bookcase in there. So I did read The Shuddering last night, and I made it to chapter 6, not to 7, but to 6. I really am enjoying this book, except really for the character of April, who is Sawyer's girlfriend. I kind of like the characters. I like, the dynamics between Lauren and Ryan, and also the past history between Jane and Sawyer and what's kind of going on with them. But these creatures in this book don't play. I mean, they do not play, and you really don't seem to have a chance. And our characters are in a very terrifying situation because they are in the middle of nowhere in this home, and no one knows that they're really there. And they're starting to hear some noises coming from outside. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, there's a dog in this book too, named Una. Una is a husky, and whenever you have a dog in a story, you're always worried about the dog, something happening to it. So I will tell you that Una is fine right now, but I am so worried about the dog. Not so much about the people, but the dog I am worried about. But dogs can sense things, and Una is really on edge because she knows that something is out there lurking. And there are some other signs that they're getting that kind of creeping them out a little bit. And then April does get a piece of information, but does she share it with the group? Of course not. She's an outsider, and she's not really liking the fact that Sawyer and Jane are together again, because Sawyer's supposed to be with April. But anyway, we have some kills happening, still the spooky vibes. Something really awful is going to happen to this group, and I'm just curious who's going to survive. That's all I want to know. Who's going to survive? This morning, I got up early, so I drove to the South Shore. I went to my dad's, picked him up. We went to go visit my mom for about an hour. I was able to get back on the road and head back to the North Shore because the weather really did get bad here for a while. So I got home, I ate lunch, and then I figured, let me read a little bit because it's the perfect weather to read. I ended up reading for about a half an hour, and then I took a nap because I ended up staying up late last night reading The Shuddering. And then I got up and made myself a cup of coffee, and I finished Scariest Book Ever. It wasn't really what I expected it to be. I thought the scariest book ever this was going to be the scariest book ever. But there was so much potential for this story, and you really didn't know what was in the scariest book ever. So I just felt like it was kind of like a cat and mouse, a lot of running around, looking for this and that, a lot of, mistaken identities. Who do you believe? That kind of stuff. I mean, it was entertaining enough. I'm giving it 3 stars because, like I said yesterday, you have to really put yourself in the mind of a child. Would a child enjoy reading this? Yes, probably so. Betty and Billy were fine. Of course, I worried about Bellamy the dog throughout the whole entire book because the poor thing was like on a leash, chained to like a shed. What about the dog? They don't seem to really worry about the dog. It bothers me. That's why they really shouldn't have dogs in stories, especially if there's potential for them to get hurt. It just doesn't bode well with me. But the way it ended was almost like what needed to be kind of like in the middle of the book, and then we could have had a little more action. For being a first book in a series, you would have thought it would have been more substantial, I guess. If you love Goosebumps in the series, I would recommend just read it. 3-star read. It was just kind of okay. It's Tuesday evening, and last night I made it to chapter 11 in the Shuddering. I have 80 pages left, and oh my goodness, this is reading like a horror movie. The creatures are relentless and terrifying. Our poor little group is in major peril at this point in the story. My group of 5, I was naive to think that they're all going to come out of this unscathed and with no trauma. Well, that was wishful thinking on my part, because one of the group is definitely dead. It is a horror story, so we are going to have some casualties. But I will tell you, at this point, the dog is still alive. I know that might be kind of a spoiler, but for those of you that love animals, especially dogs, you might want to know that going into the story if you ever decide to pick up The Shuddering. My hope is that I can finish it tonight. I have it to where I was pacing it for every night until the end of Winterween, but I need to know. And if my eyeballs can stay open to finish it, that's what I'm going to do tonight. I have to know how it's going to end. On another note, I started Slewfoot by Brom, and I'm already captivated. It does start off pretty freaky. Abatha is our main character. She was sold by her father, basically, to a Puritan in a colonial town of Sutton. This takes place in 1666. She is in a position where, even though she's kind of sassy and she wants to speak her mind, you as a woman could not speak your mind back then. You could not. You had to be quiet. Not only submissive to your own husband, but you had to be kind of submissive to all men. You couldn't have an opinion about anything, and if any man asked you to do something, you had to do it. I could not live during that period of time. It would have been terrible. I probably would have been in stocks all the time. But Abatha, she kind of pushes the envelope, and luckily, the man that she married, Edward, is a very kind man. He's about 10 years older than she is. She's rather young. He tries very hard to be gentle with her. There are some times where he has to, kind of put her in her place for her own good, not because he wants to treat her sternly, but there are moments when he has to. She doesn't fit in really well at all. She's just like a fish out of water, basically. But something happens in the beginning that sets the tone of what's to come, and it seems like it's going to be creepy and scary. I like the character of Abatha so far, and I'm rooting for her, but I'm also kind of a little nervous that she's going to cross the line and something bad's going to happen to her, but I'm hoping not anyway. After all, it is another horror story. One thing I've noticed so far is there are no twins in this story. So like I said, that would have been pretty funny if I would have read a third book for Winterween and it had twins in it. Wish me luck that I can finish The Shuddering tonight, and then all I'll have left is Slewfoot until the end of Winterween. Alicia says, I'm glad to hear things are going well. I'm also excited that you're reading Slewfoot. I know. Oh my gosh, I'm loving this. I actually started it last night. I am participating in Winterween, and I have been vlogging my week, and I had to finish The Shuddering last night. Okay, this book, oh my goodness, I have so many thoughts about it, but I have not written my review because I finished it last night. It was about 10 o'clock. It was a little bit after 10 o'clock, so I haven't written my review on it, and I had to sit with it because after finishing, I was like, what just happened? Good afternoon, everyone. It is Thursday and the last day of Winterween. It also happens to be my birthday, so happy birthday to me. I am on my way to see my parents, and I'm about to make a quick stop at Crumble Cookie to get some cookies in celebration of my birthday. Yesterday, I filmed my TBR for my Edgar Allan Poe readathon that I'm doing. in January, and then I had sprints last night. So I thought I was going to get a bunch of reading done last night, and I didn't get as much as I planned. I am on chapter 4 of Slewfoot. I'm enjoying it. Basically, there's two stories going on right now. We have the rise of Slewfoot, and we also have the story about Abatha. And Abatha and Edward had their farm, which they were paying Wallace for it because Wallace actually inherited it from his father in addition to his own farm, which was the family farm. And they have one more payment to pay on this farm. Well, that's what the whole turmoil was, why Abatha was speaking up, because, Wallace was trying to bully Edward into giving his farm over to Wallace so Wallace could pay his debts. Well, Abatha gave Edward the courage to stand up to him. The ministers agreed with Edward, and so they're keeping their farm. But this does not make Wallace happy at all. In fact, he's trying to get Lord Mansfield to intervene so that he can kind of get Abatha out of the picture, or at least get her to be punished, by being put in the stocks or being thrashed or whatever the case may be. But unfortunately, they have a small victory before Edward dies, and it's really sad. I did not want Edward to die because he's such a gentle, kind man. And because of this leaves Abatha more vulnerable. So now not only does Abatha have to deal with Wallace on her own, but she also has had an encounter with Slewfoot, and that's going to make things a little bit worse for Abatha, as far as it's one thing to have to deal with Wallace, but then she has to also deal with Slewfoot. But Slewfoot is still trying to regain his power right now, so he's not as much of a danger to Abatha at this point. But if things keep going in the direction they're going, then I think there is going to be a serious situation coming up for her. But I really am just still kind of feeling my way through it and not really knowing where it's going to lead. And that's kind of exciting in a way, to not really know what direction this is going in. It's not scary, or it's not as scary as I thought it was going to be. And maybe the scariness is coming, but I'm really enjoying the storytelling. And there are some gruesome parts in it, don't get me wrong, but it's just not as frightening as I thought it was going to be in the very beginning. Now, I know that you're probably wondering what's going on with the shuttering. Yes, I did finish it on Tuesday evening, and I actually wrote my review on Goodreads this morning. But I'm not ready to fill you in yet. I'm running late and I need to get over to the South Shore, spend some time with my mom. Once I get back home, I will go ahead and update y'all on the shuttering. I will tell you that I liked it very much, and I can't wait to share my thoughts with you. I'm back and I want to talk about the shuttering and my thoughts about it. I'm so happy that this was one of my choices for Winterween. I really enjoyed it. So let me just say a few things about it. First of all, it is the perfect winter read, in my opinion. I think it reads like a horror movie. I mentioned that earlier on in the vlog, that I like the fact that it is set in a cold, isolated, mountainous area, and it's quiet. And you couple that with a creature that is fast, that is strong, horrifying by the description of it. It's got, these teeth, and it's very tall. And just sounds, in my mind, it's very gross. That's all I can say. But what I mean about the horror movie vibes that I get from it, it starts off where you have the creatures introduced right off the bat. They make their first kill, and you're like, holy cow, this is what the story is going to be about. And then it shifts gears and you meet the group. You meet Ryan and Jane and Lauren and Sawyer and April and Una the dog. And they're happy and they're excited to be together, and they're going to do snowboarding and just, they haven't been together in a while. And so they're trying to catch up. And this is they're like their last hurrah before everybody goes their separate ways. And then it switches again. And then you see some more deaths at the hands of these creatures. So the whole time, you, the reader, know that this horrible creature, monster, is out there waiting and it's watching, and it seems to be getting closer to the cabin where this group is staying. And they do get clues. They see blood on the ground, they're hearing things, like April heard something at the resort, but they don't really seem concerned about it because the deaths have always seemed to be people who have gone off the beaten path and they've gotten off the trail. And so the townsfolk just kind of feel like, there's a reason why you shouldn't get off the trail, because there are animals out there, there are wolves out there. So the townsfolk really think these attacks are more or less animal attacks, like by wolves, and not by some monstrous creature out there lurking. But I just loved how you kind of didn't really know much about the monsters, and that people just have to try to fight something that they don't understand. And that really makes the stakes higher. I will say that this story is more plot driven than character driven, but I do think Allburn does a good job, good enough to where you at least care about the characters. I liked the relationship between Ryan and Jane. I think that he was very protective of his sister. I did like the character Lauren very much. And of course, I love the dog Una. But Sawyer and April, I like Sawyer. And at first I really didn't like April, but then I could kind of see where she was coming from because of the love triangle that kind of happened between Sawyer, April, and Jane. And so I could kind of see where she was coming from and what motivated her to make some of the decisions that she made. And I appreciated the fact that it was there for the purposes of raising the stakes about the situation with the creatures. It made it more believable about them making some of the decisions that they made, even though I didn't necessarily agree with their decisions. And it wasn't like a cheesy situation. So in that respect, I cared about these characters enough that it made me upset when things didn't go the way I thought they would go with them. Now, I do think that this is a survival story. I really do think this is a survival story because you've got two types of survival. You have the monsters who are trying to survive, and you have the humans also trying to survive. Unfortunately, their survival of the monsters depends on the humans and affects how the humans are going to be able to come out of this. One of the things that kind of bothered me at first was that Allborn did not really explain why the monsters were all of a sudden coming out and going on this kind of kill fest. At first, I'm thinking this doesn't make much sense to me because Don and Jenny, who is a couple we meet at the beginning of the novel, have lived in this area in their little cabin for like 30 years. They said 3 decades, and they didn't seem to have any issues or have any problems or seemed worried about going out of their home to do various tasks that they had to do. Now, Don does think in his mind when he comes up against one of the creatures that he knows about these creatures because of the stories his father has told them, that they will come when it snows and that you can't really escape them if they come after you. However, I'm thinking, okay, so it's been 3 decades that these people live there and they haven't had any kind of altercations with them. Why are they suddenly here? And then I thought about it. The monsters are probably in a situation where their environment has changed and maybe they don't have access to prey like they did at one time, or maybe their prey has dwindled down. And the only reason I thought about this is because I have family that lives in Utah, and they were in a severe drought in 2021 when I visited, and the deer were coming down from the mountains to seek out water. So then that's what made me think these monsters, these creatures, in order for them to survive, they have to move to a food source. And so I think that's why they're crossing their paths, because a lot of the people getting killed in the area are in their homes or close to their homes. When it comes to the humans having to survive, it's the fact that they now are the prey. In order for them to survive this horrific situation, they either have to fight or it's going to be flight. And either way, they still have to contend with the monsters. I don't think the group really had much choice in the matter, because these creatures were patient and they were just waiting for opportunity. I enjoyed this book very much, as I said. It was a 4-star read for me. It was my first Allburn novel, and it will not be my last. And I would recommend it to anyone who enjoys reading horror stories, especially if you don't mind gore and you don't mind gruesome monsters and you don't mind an ending that's not necessarily the happiest ending. I will say that. At first I was a little upset about the way it ended, and I'm like, I don't know. But to me, it was probably the most realistic. I would really be naive to think that it would have ended up being like a happy, happy, joy, joy situation. Hello, everyone. It is Friday evening. I know Winterween officially ended yesterday. However, I was not finished with Slewfoot by Brom. So I spent a good portion of today finishing up, and it was time well spent. I really, really, really enjoyed this book. At first I thought, her encounter with Slewfoot was going to be like a terrible thing. Well, unbeknownst to me, she and Slewfoot become friends. Now, she calls Slewfoot Samson because he doesn't really know what his name is. He's kind of having an identity crisis of sorts, because he is rising up from this darkness that he's been in for quite a while, and he doesn't really know who he is, and he's getting conflicting information from some of the wild folk. But he has developed a connection with Abatha. And so she decides to call him Samson because that was the name of her goat, who Slewfoot ended up initially drinking its blood, and kind of started this whole process of him rising up again. Slewfoot figures he can help her out, and in the meantime, Abatha can perhaps help him out. So things are going along. She's having a lot of trouble with Wallace, because every time Wallace challenges her, she is able to figure out a way to keep her farm and to keep going. And this angers Wallace, because he would not want a woman to put him in his place, or to, take away from him this farm that he basically wants to use to pay his debts, because he doesn't want to lose his own farm. He wants to take it away from Abatha because he hates her so much. But both of them, in my opinion, both Abatha as well as Samson, are struggling, I should say, with how they fit in this world. Abatha really doesn't belong in a Puritan society. She likes to be with nature. She is what they consider a cunning woman, which means someone who works with folk medicine, or, makes little charms, and it's all innocent. It's not anything that is to do with the devil. She's not really doing anything that they would consider like witchcraft. She's kind of an outcast in that sense, and then she's not from this area. Also, she's from England, from London, and I don't know, these Puritan people who are so Christian-like don't treat her very nicely. They treat her like she's like less than. Anyway, both of them are kind of struggling where they fit in the world. And I just think it takes Samson longer to realize what his part is, whereas Abatha actually knows what her place is. It's that she doesn't necessarily agree with it, and she does know when she can buck the system and when she should keep quiet, and she knows that when she does buck the system, or like she bucks Wallace, she knows that there's going to be consequences, and she's prepared to deal with those. It is very atmospheric. It's steeped in folklore. I love the exploration of magic and the natural world, like with the wild folk and the fae. It's also has mythological elements to it, but then it's also interwoven with this puritanical society. And so you're getting a little bit of paganism versus Puritanism. You're dealing with a historical period in time where it was very frustrating for women because they really had little to no rights. This is like a very male-dominated society, and a lot of times they were using religion and in the name of God for these men to get their way or to make these decisions. So it was also harder for anyone who seemed a little different, like Abatha, who was considered someone like cunning folk, where they're gonna make these little charms, or like when she decides to make an ointment to help Reverend Carter and his wife. But that all comes to kind of bite Abatha in the butt later on, and also it does actually cause problems for the Reverend and his wife. What's really horrific about the story is the craziness, and that these people, and I'm talking men and women, that the hysteria that they would get into and all the stuff that they would make themselves believe once they decide that Abatha's a witch, wanting to punish her, for just being a person that is free and loved nature and really just wanted her independence and wanted to just live her life on her own terms. So that's just very scary because that really did happen in history. And what really is frightening is the fact that the men would do all these tests or methods of trying to make people confess. And you see this with the character of Sarah Carter. What they would do with women if they thought that they were a witch or being accused of witchcraft or consorting with the devil is they basically would kill these women because they would torture them to the point that they would just die. And then they would be like, well, I guess they really weren't a witch. Well, by that time it's too late. I think this story was well written. I love the dual perspective that you get from Abatha as well as Samson, also known as Slewfoot. I think that Abatha and Samson are both complex characters. They're well developed. You see a lot of changes in both of these characters. And I loved the contrast with the Puritan townfolk and the antagonist, like Wallace and the magistrate. And I do think they're a little bit one-dimensional. I think Brom wanted them to be more one-dimensional because it shows the rigidity and the closed-mindedness, the fact that they're inflexible, that they don't have imagination, that they're not willing to change their opinions about things. It's all black and white with the Puritans. There's no gray in between. They don't want anything to rock their boat. They don't want anything to be out of their boundaries of their neat little society or whatever it is. And that's why they dress the way they did. Everything was like stark and bleak. They hide behind their religious convictions. And that was one of the things that I love, that Abatha constantly questioned that, God would not want this to happen. Why would you say this in the name of God? And so she struggled with that, back and forth. I loved it. I loved the story. It's my first book that I've read by Brom. I also loved the beautiful artwork that was included in the novel. It just added a little extra flavor to the story, and it was a 5-star read for me. As you can see, I had a blast participating in my first Winterween. Many thanks to Gabby at Gabby Reads for hosting this wonderful winter event. It was a wonderful way to kick off the new year. I enjoyed everything that I read this week, and I came out of it with a 5-star read. How about you? Did you participate in Winterween? If so, what was one of your favorite reads? Let me know in the comments below. As always, I appreciate you stopping by. I appreciate you watching. And in the meantime, stay amazing and be adventurous.